Welcome back to the Scarlet Faithful podcast. I'm Aaron Brightman. As always, this episode is brought to you by Knights of the Raritan, the Rutgers NIL Collective. Click on the link in the description of this episode to join their free newsletter to find out more about exclusive event invites and programming they have this year. And as always, to become a member on how to help Rutgers student athletes with NIL. Happy to have Jake Butt, Michigan great and BTN analyst, back on the podcast. Jake, to give you credit first, you were the very first national analyst to give Rutgers a lot of hype going into this year at Big Ten Media Days. You were the first one to really get people excited, and now it seems like every day there's another national analyst jumping on the bandwagon. I guess what really stood out to you this offseason in terms of looking at this roster, this team, that you have high hopes for this Rutgers team in 2024?
Yeah, you can say former Michigan player, current Big Ten analyst, and I guess you can also say friend of the Rutgers program at this point, because I'm kind of all in. It really wasn't this offseason, though. This started last year when I was just watching film. I called the Rutgers-Michigan game, and I was like, okay, I knew how good Michigan was, and that was a very close game deep into the second half. And I said, man, if Wimsatt could give them something, this would be a different team. Then I called Rutgers, Iowa, which was the week after Rutgers, Ohio State. And I still, to this day, now 2 years as an analyst, I don't think I've seen a more physical game than that Rutgers, Ohio State game last year. You could just, I didn't have sound, but I could almost hear the way that game sounded. And it kind of hurt them because Rutgers was a little bit beat up the next week against Iowa and lost. And you get exposed to the low-hanging fruit takes where Rutgers is, for some reason, a punching bag of national fans of college football. And it just, all of a sudden, it is this perfect recipe for me mentally to be like, you guys are dead wrong. Like, one, Rutgers is a good football team, and at times even better than good. Shiano is a really damn good coach. I'd love to play for him. But the truth is you're in the Big Ten East, which is one of the deepest divisions, especially with how good Michigan had been, one of the deepest divisions in college football. You have to go through Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State every single year. Even Michigan State had some years in there where they were really good. That is a recipe for disaster. It just means you're fighting uphill every single year. So I knew with the divisions going away, and I knew from what I saw with Shiano last year, and then I'm looking at the returning production, and I said, wow, Rutgers returns a lot of guys. And I'm looking at this, and then I look at their schedule, and I'm piecing it all together. I'm like, wait, this could be a very special year this year. And the biggest question is what's going to happen at quarterback? And, Wimsatt struggled last year. I mean, gosh, there was some plays in that Ohio State game, a couple double moves where you're like, wow, that's a touchdown left on the field. Another play, man, that was a touchdown left on the field. What remains to be seen is how good Kaliakmanis will be. But I do think as a passer, he's an upgrade over Wimsatt. So I think you start to piece all these things together and you say, this could be a special year for the Scarlet Knights.
Yeah, a lot of Rutgers fans are with you on that Ohio State game. That's one that still feels like it slipped away a little bit. It was a golden opportunity. And I agree with you on that Iowa game. I think they just weren't themselves. They were pretty beat up. Some collateral damage there. Let's start with the offense, just in terms of Kaliakmanis. I know you called a couple Minnesota games last year. What, I guess, did you see from him last year? And do you think that he can bring to this offense that, while expectations I think are reasonable, no one expects him to come in and be a top, third quarterback in the league. What does he need to do to make this offense better this coming season?
What I see is a guy that's capable, but inconsistent. I see a guy that has the ability to play quarterback at a high level, at a decently high level. I've seen him make some special throws. I've seen him leave the pocket and do some things. I've seen him operate the offense. And then there's periods where you're like, what is going on there, Kaliakmanis? I don't know. So the question is, now another year, he's back with Kirk Shiraka, who he's familiar with, in an offense he should be familiar with a running back that, should be familiar with what Minnesota was trying to do, which was surround him with a great running game. So the thing for him here is, man, can you make the smart plays? Can you move the chains when the opportunity presents itself. You're going to have some great opportunities in play action with how good Monangai is. Can you make the defense pay? Can you keep them keep them honest? I think another piece of this is what was so impressive about Monangai. Somehow this guy's underrated. This guy was running into 8-man boxes last year and still put up the stats that he did. If you can even have a average passing attack, you'll keep defenses honest. And I'd love to see Monangai running into lighter boxes. It's kind of those. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. It'll feed itself. So the offense is going to be run first. It's going to go through Monangai in that running back room. They just need Kaliakmanis to be himself. Don't go outside of your capability. Just be yourself and make the plays when they're there.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think that's part of why I think being so optimistic about this team, it's not like they have to reinvent the wheel. You know, they don't need to complete all these deep passes. If they could just first down, second down, mix in some short pass plays to keep the defense honest. And also wanted to ask you about Monangai. I know you love him as a Big Ten player. Sam Brown, high hopes for him now, a year fully healthy. I guess you talked about the 8-man boxes on Monangai last year. Do you think that teams will scheme for him any differently? Do you think he'll have a challenge now coming in with a rep as the Big Ten leading rusher? And how much do you think having support with Sam Brown will help him throughout the season in terms of keeping him fresh?
Yeah, I don't think there's not more defenses could do. Those boxes were already full last year. You know, like you're not just going to put 10 guys at the line of scrimmage. You know, the teams that played Rutgers, it was very obvious, even to the common fan, what Rutgers' recipe for success was. Even on 3rd and 6, 3rd and 8, 3rd and 10, they were running the ball. Like Shiano was not comfortable throwing the football. And I say that because what made Monangai so special is the best backs, they make one guy miss. They make the first guy miss. He consistently did that. But then he had the ability to get downhill and just run right through the defenders. Consistently fell forward, took care of the football, had great vision and feel, and knew how to set up his blocks. He's just a really well-rounded, quality running back, and he did it kind of with his back against the wall with some of those looks. Now, what can happen is you know that is wear and tear. I know they like Sam Brown. There's been many times where we're calling a Rutgers game and you hear whispers about Sam Brown. You tell me though, is he healthy? What's the reports coming out of camp? I haven't followed that part as closely. I mean, when he had a few games where he really flashed, right? And I know Rutgers was excited about him. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, 2 years ago, that game against Ohio State, he had like 70 yards in the first half, and he looked like a legit Big Ten back. Obviously had the injury, ran over 100 yards against Indiana, but got hurt. So he really didn't look himself most of last year. And then that last month, even though the competition increased and Monangai struggled a little bit because he was so worn down, you saw flashes of the old Sam Brown come back. He's had a full offseason now to really get ready for this year. And I know they're really high on him. And I just think the ability to mix him in more, will kind of, make them a little bit less predictable, but also I think could be a 1-2 punch that while Monangai might see his production go down a little bit, he can be more effective as the season goes on by having them as a combo.
The thing is I even felt Monangai, he was one of those backs that really did get better as the game went on. Like it didn't seem like he ever ran out of gas, at least from my observation. I don't remember an instance where it was like, man, it looks like Kyle, needs a week to get his body right. Like it felt like that guy was consistently, if he was on the field, he was going 100%. Another reason why I just love watching him. He's one of my favorite players.
Yeah, and as obviously as a tight end yourself, but what does that do for an offensive line in terms of a team and even the receivers, just in the blocking game and the run game, when you have a back like that? How does that kind of motivate and inspire the rest of the team as you're, in that fourth quarter trying to whittle away a victory?
Well, I think what it does, it's like, again, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy where I think the receivers, it's really the receivers, I'd say, that where you'll notice the biggest difference. Those downfield blocks are the difference between a 10-yard gain and a touchdown. And when the receivers know they have a running back that's going to consistently get to the second level and do some special things after that, like they're going to block a little bit harder. What it does for the offensive line, though, sometimes, fans are watching the game at home and you're going to see as the running back's getting the handoff, there's a hole open out off to the left. and you're like, hey, hit that hole right now. But the best backs, and this is what Monangai does very well, you don't want to hit that hole yet because you have a double team that's focused on the down lineman and working their way up to that second level. So what the best backs will do is they're going to be patient. They're going to press that double team. What that does then is those linemen, then they don't have to go very far. The linebacker at the second level is going to come to them. That's when Monangai can hit the burst and get a half body on a second level defender or make a safety or corner miss and get those extra yards. So it's all across the board where the entire offense knows, hey, let's just do our job. Let's strain, block through the echo of the whistle. And we got a running back that's going to give us 110% of everything he's got.
Yeah, that's some great analysis there. And did want to get your take on the Rutgers tight end situation. Kenny Fletcher converting from the defensive side of the ball. Did play some wide receiver in high school. Rutgers seems all in on him as the starting tight end. Obviously, last year with the offense didn't incorporate tight end much in the pass game. He's going to block, I'm sure, but I think does have the potential a little bit in the pass game as a receiver. What are your initial thoughts on him and how hard it is to convert from the defensive side into that position?
Johnny Langan. I did like watching that guy. And I think what Johnny did so well last year was that guy strained in the blocking game. And you know, I consistently saw him being used in unique ways to help spring some runs. And I always admired that about him. And that's one of the biggest challenges now coming from the defensive side of the ball to the offense. It's also just challenging, even if you played tight end your whole life, to block these guys. You know, it's so, but so much of this is going to come down to just strain in the want to, in the will. I just can't imagine in this offense at the tight end position. You know, there's one football. That football is going to be going to Monangai quite a bit. So the way to make a difference at the tight end position is going to be by straining in the blocking games and trying to find ways to spring runs. Off of that, that's when the play action will open up. But I think a lot of this is going to start with who's willing and able to strain and make a difference in the run game.
It's a great point. Shifting to the defense, obviously Rutgers has a lot of returning starters, a lot of big names from last year. Motoray, Aaron Lewis, of course, Tyreen Powell coming back from a second injury now. I guess, what are your thoughts on the Rutgers defense? How much do you think they can build off of last year? And in your overall view of the Big Ten, where do you think they could end up in terms of a defensive unit across the conference?
I mean, they should be one of those top units once again. I mean, there's a lot of great defenses. Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State should all have great defenses. Iowa returns a ton on that side of the football. But once again, like this is Shiano's bread and butter. This is what they do. I really would have to ask you, because I feel the starting unit, and once again, this is the benefit of this team. They are veteran and experienced, but I'm not as familiar with the depth. The one thing that can make a huge difference for any team. But I'm not familiar with the guys behind the starting defensive line. Tyreen Powell's coming back from 2 injuries. I love that kid. I admire his, just will to keep pushing. I don't know I'm not as familiar with the linebackers behind Muhammad Toure and Tyreen Powell. You got, Flip Dixon and Longer being there in the back end. Feels like the secondary should be loaded once again. My question would be, how confident are you with the depth of this defense?
Well, that's funny you say that, because my next question to you is going to be, as a developmental program, right? And obviously you came from a program where everyone was 4-star, 5-star. This obviously is not that type of program, but you have so many starters back, right? So the challenge of being able to develop that younger core while also having your starters get the majority of the reps, that is actually something that I'm worried about, just in terms of the long-term picture. Obviously you don't want to sacrifice this year, but how much can they get out of those younger guys? I think linebacker Moses Walker is the guy that a lot of people really hope can step up. He was a 4-star, tore his ACL 2 training camps ago. Played a little bit last year, showed some flashes on special teams, but I think he's a guy, because I think the thing with the Rutgers defense is that when they can move Motoray around and have him a little bit more versatile, line him up on the edge some, I think they're a lot more unpredictable and more dangerous on the edge there. So even if Powell is healthy, if they could play Moses Walker at times, at that second linebacker spot and move Teray around. You can move Aaron Lewis inside. I just think it makes them that much more dangerous as a defense. So that, to me, I think of any kind of player to step up this year, I look at Moses Walker, and then obviously you lose Max Melton at corner. You have Eric Rogers replacing him. He was the third corner last year, showed some signs as well. But as you mentioned, that safety group is, I feel, one of the best in the Big Ten with Igba Newsom, Shaquan Loyal, and Flip Dixon, like you mentioned.
Yeah, no, that's, again, like these are names that I think more people will be, start to get to know. I know those names, you know what I mean? I think more people outside of the Rutgers community will start to know and feel these names. Because Mo Teray, like he can do some things rushing the passer as well in different third down packages. Like that's kind of what you're alluding to here, is get Aaron Lewis, move him inside, put Mo Teray on the line, get into some exotic packages on third down to make teams pay. Would love to see that. But this is where the schedule, it's not as easy to say as, great, the schedule's easy, you should win a ton of games. Now there's an importance in the games where you should win and really should dominate to do exactly that. I think it's Howard week 1. Is that right?
Yep.
You have got to dominate that game so your depth can get significant snaps in the second half. When you have opportunities to get to a 3-score lead and keep your starters fresh, one, but get these rotational pieces significant game time reps. That's absolutely important. There's going to be a ton of games where Rutgers should just win. The key is win in a very clean fashion so you can rotate some of these guys, not just going forward for next year. You'll likely need them at some point this year. That's just the way football goes. And it's true for any team that wants to do special things. Depth is a big factor. Michigan winning the national title last year, they were deep. They were deep at a ton of positions. That helped them. That's going to be the case for Rutgers once again this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Health is certainly, a huge requirement for them to achieve their ceiling this year. Malcolm Ray's a guy, too, on the defensive line from Florida State that got significant time there last year. I'm excited about him. Wesley Bailey on the edge was hurt most of last season, so he's a guy that fully healthy, I think, could be a huge factor, was 2 years ago. But in terms of, I wanted to ask you, at Michigan, obviously, you were on some teams that didn't do as well. Then Harbaugh came in. And I guess for this Rutgers team comparatively, all the seniors, they were part of losing teams, right? And now they broke through last year. And now expectations are through the roof going into this year. How was it like for your experience at Michigan in terms of that change in mentality as a team? And how challenging is that to go from the hunter to not necessarily the hunted as a favorite, but like you said, there's certain games we look at now and we expect them to win.
Yeah, that's going to be one of the more interesting storylines to watch here, because football is such a demanding sport. Like you almost forget to breathe sometimes. You know what I mean? In the length of the season, like you tense up because we're at war. Every single day you're at war. And that's actually to your benefit. That is a good thing, to be in a state of fight or flight during football season. You don't want to relax. You want to go. But the way we started this conversation is about all the narratives around Rutgers right now. And the biggest challenge, and this is where leadership, locker room leadership, this has got to be set by the Kyle Monungais of your team, by the leaders, the veterans of your team. You don't want to relax. It's an illusion. Like don't even go over there to drink that tea. Don't go over there to drink that water. You think you want to relax because it is such a grind, but you don't. The goal for these guys is to approach this season as if none of this is even real. It was a good season last year. There was a lot of meat left on the bone. There's an opportunity to have a great season this year. Even though it's favorable, that doesn't mean it'll be easy. Not even close to easy. So I think probably one of the more encouraging things, and you guys would know this better than me. I watch a guy like Monungai, his approach, the way he plays the game. Culture is set by the way your best players carry themselves. Monungai, Aaron Lewis, some of the veterans on these team, I don't have really any concerns that these guys are going to go out there and give anything less than 100% when they take the field.
Yeah, that's been a big theme this offseason. Shiano and the coaches just talking about how it's a player run program now, players taking the lead in terms of being on the field and just getting the younger guys together. And there certainly is a lot of guys on both sides of the ball that have this is their chance. And I think they understand the opportunity in front of them. So high hopes there. I wanted to ask you about the schedule. Like you said, it's more manageable, but I also look at the schedule and there's a lot of 50-50 matchup games there. There's not those kind of automatic losses in the past from being in the Big Ten East. But other than Akron and Howard, really, to be fair, I think Rutgers could win or lose any of those games. I guess how much does that take place in terms of the grind, right? Knowing that you're in these battles week after week after week, and not having that kind of demoralizing, as everyone's human, going to Michigan, going to Penn State, playing those games in November like they did back to back to back to back. How much can that help too in terms of keep this team focused and maybe be able to bounce back a little quicker from a setback?
Yeah, I look at it and there's a ton of 50-50 games, but even in those 50-50 games, there's not a lot of question marks on this Rutgers team. Again, we're gonna talk about what Kaliakmanis can do. And the best thing would be to go out there and have an efficient first 3-4 weeks to the season, build his confidence. All of a sudden, those games should be a little bit less 50-50. I mean, I can go down the list of teams in the Big Ten and talk about question marks. Rutgers has their identity intact. Again, we've talked about the experience. The question now is, so, you look at that back half of the schedule and there's like a bundle of teams where it's like, man, Rutgers should be able to win those games, not will win those games, should be able to win those games. Like where can they create an advantage and where can they capitalize on that advantage? And how can they do that week after week after week? Again, this season has a chance to have great momentum to it. And that matters so much in a long football season. So there's an early part of this, as they're trying to get Kaliakmanis involved, get their confidence up, get out to a 4-0, 5-0, 5-1 record would be great. And then all of a sudden, the back half of that schedule, capitalize on that confidence that you built. This could be. I can see a double-digit win season. I just can see it. I don't think it'll be easy. I don't think it's a guarantee, but again, when you in the Big Ten, when you can play defense the way these guys are going to play defense this year, when you can complement that with what should be a dominant running game, man, you're going to be in every single game. Can you win those key moments in the second half? All of a sudden, like you'll be knocking on the door of some of these double-digit victories. I mean, you're going across the country to play USC. You got 2 bye weeks too, right? So you're going across the country to play USC on a Friday night. That's going to be a huge test for the maturity of this team. On a short week, cross-country travel, night game, it's like a midnight kickoff. I think we're going to learn a lot about the team that week in terms of their maturity and what they're capable of doing this year. Because, the best teams, all that being said, of the travel, the timing, it shouldn't matter. The best teams are going to go out there and win anyways. USC has a lot more question marks. Even though they're a bigger brand maybe on the national scale, USC has much more question marks than the Rutgers team right now. So that's probably a 50-50 game. But as you look at it, that's a great example of a team that has a ton of question marks hosting a Rutgers team that's extremely veteran and knows exactly who they are. It's going to be a fascinating match.
Yeah, I love that. That'll be music to Rutgers fans' ears. And a lot of fans are pointing to 2006, what 2005 was like when Rutgers broke through with their first bowl game under Schiano. And then it just took off in 2006 for that breakout year. I did want to ask you quickly, just in terms of the Big Ten. Obviously, you mentioned USC, the other Pac-12 schools coming, Oregon, Washington, and UCLA. Rutgers playing all 3 of the 4, not playing Oregon. I guess in terms of Big Ten football identity, those teams come from a different kind of conference in terms of a little bit more up-tempo offenses. How do you think they'll fit in year one? And how do you think, I guess, will the identity of the conference over time, you think, maybe change a bit with their inclusion?
Well, even think about that. Of those 4 teams, the one team anyone would not want to play would be Oregon, and Rutgers avoids Oregon. I mean, holy cow. You get 2 of the teams that have brand new coaches, and Washington returns 1 starter, and UCLA is, I'm not really buying into that narrative as much about like the identity of I mean, I look at there's different identities across the board. Iowa has a completely different identity than Ohio State. Michigan has a completely different identity. Penn State and Maryland have different identities. Even Wisconsin, year over year, you go from 22 personnel with fullbacks to the air raid now with Phil Longo as their offensive coordinator. Washington won the Joe Moore Award. Oregon's going to have one of the best offensive lines in college football. UCLA had an elite defense under Danton Lynn, who's now the defensive coordinator of USC. The conference is so big now that there's not one singular identity. You're going to get a little bit of everything across the board. And the fact of the matter is each team's going to have to find out the winning formula for them, what gives them the best chance to win. But I don't think that there's a singular conference. I think teams are going to have to adjust when they play Oregon. Oregon's coming from the Pac-12. They're so good. Oregon's going to be the tempo setter. Washington has historically been a great program. We got the air show coming here in Chicago, so I just got fighter jets whizzing past me. Lincoln Riley is one of the best offensive minds in college football. So like all of those are reasons that other teams are going to have to adjust to match the intensity of those teams. So it just all I'm saying is it makes for a really interesting season.
All right, 2 more questions for you. One, in terms of interesting season, college football playoff expanded to 12 teams now. How many teams from the Big Ten do you think in terms of spots will be available? And Rutgers 10-2, let's just say it happens. Is there a scenario in which they can make it?
Yeah, I think 3 is a very safe floor. I think three teams from the Big Ten should get in there. 10-2 with Rutgers, it leads to a great topic because their schedule it's really favorable, but they don't have the opportunity for marquee wins. Whereas there might be a team with 3 losses that has 3 great ranked wins, and the committee then has to say, do we like a 10-2 record without maybe some big marquee wins? Or are we okay having a 9-3 team get in? Yes, they have 3 losses, but they have 3 big time wins. That's going to be one of the more fascinating things to watch unfold down the stretch of the season.
I think just in saying that too, it kind of really does emphasize your previous point about USC being such an important game. Because I think just from a statement standpoint across college football, if they could go to USC and win that game, regardless of what USC ends up being, that's still going to be a big resume builder for them.
Yep, 100%.
And then just last question for you, just in terms of Rutgers going into this season, with the future that they have, recruiting on the uptick, year 10 for Rutgers in the Big Ten, how much do you think, and you were a player when they started in the conference, and now with new teams from the Pac-12, how much do you think Rutgers is kind of accepted in the Big Ten as a program across the board, but also how important is this opportunity for them to take that step up and to show the rest of the league that from a football perspective, the program is on its way up and at year 10, very competitive now?
Yeah, I feel like anyone with a brain should accept them in the Big Ten, right? I mean, this is I know nothing else. Like this is the Big Ten. I accept the new 4 teams, right? We got to embrace change. That's the world we live in. But to your point, this is a huge year for Schiano. Recruiting it's like advertising. It's just about getting in front of these high school players over and over and over again, and that you got to get out to an early lead. You got to get out a jump on your record. You got to get to that 5-1, 6-1, 7-1, 8-2 would be great, because all of a sudden, as the next generation of great football players is turning on ESPN or whatever network they're watching, we're going to be talking about the playoff conversation, and we'll have to include Rutgers in that conversation. I think it's also really interesting how good high school football is out there in New Jersey. And what a great opportunity now for Schiano to capture, some of that momentum to basically pitch to all the great high school players in New Jersey for what they can be a part of under his leadership. It takes a while. It'll be tough to have expectations this high every single year, but you do have a moment in time here where Schiano can capture some momentum to capitalize and hopefully raise the floor of this program going forward.
Yeah, and I've said a couple of times, if you bill yourself as a developmental program, and you have so many players at the end of their development as seniors and as returning starters, you have to hit, and you have to show results to be able to keep that forward momentum going. So I think that regardless of what the record ultimately is, they have to be able to show that in some way, I think. So we will make sure that you get mentioned often when Rutgers does fulfill what we all hope is a special season, as that first guy to give a nod to Rutgers. But as always, really appreciate your time. Thanks so much for being here, and definitely hope to catch up with you during the season as Rutgers continues to ascend within the Big Ten.
Looking forward to it, man. Thanks for having me on, Aaron.
Thanks, Jake. And thank you for listening and watching the Scarlet Faithful podcast once again.